there's obviously the journalism market right now is terrible,
Mhm.
and I'm super lucky to have a job. But I do recommend that young reporters sort of be open to anything, including things they know nothing about, or have no pre-existing interest in, and B, like, maybe cover real estate for a little bit.
Well, you make an interesting statement that the journalism business is terrible.
It's horrible.
Is it because there are just so many outlets and people are just spewing? Like what makes it so horrible?
No, it's this like we're 2 decades into the demise of print journalism, and
Right.
print ad revenue, and internet ad revenue has not replaced it. And, people have pivoted to subscription models and whatever, but they're, like, look at the Daily News and what it used to be versus what it is now. I mean, that's true. There are major cities across the country that have almost no journalism left. So
Yeah,
they have no insight into what people are, what their government is doing. And I think that breeds like distrust in media, and sort of the polarization that we see today. I mean, I think it's a real societal problem.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the Zelnik Exchange. I am your host, Cory Zelnik. Today, I have the privilege of having an old and dear friend, Dana Rubinstein, with me today. Dana is a prolific writer for the New York Times. She and I know each other going back to 2006. I referenced pre-tape. That's when we had first met. She didn't really recall, but I remember. I remember fondly, and I don't take it personally. But Dana is a graduate of Cornell University. She's from upstate New York, and she started out writing for Politico and talking real estate here in New York, and she talks politics in New York, mostly today. But I'm going to bring Dana in and allow her to tell us her story. So, Dana Rubinstein, welcome to the Zelnik Exchange.
Thanks for having me, Cory.
It's my pleasure. I was looking forward to this. I know we had to cancel because there was some stuff going on around the city, and we'll dive into that a little bit later on in the conversation. But give me a little color. Give me the start of Dana Rubinstein, and get me to today, and I'll jump in there and ask you some questions along the way. But I know that, and again, I said this. We met. You were doing some real estate writing through our good friend Roxanne Donovan back in the day. And you were doing, again, I think you were doing more real estate then, and now you're doing more politics. But, tell me about the steps along the way, if you don't mind.
The career steps?
Yeah,
Okay.
You can give me some life.
So
You can give me some life steps. You can give me career steps. Anything you want.
I became a reporter in '06. It was sort of in my, I guess, mid to late 20s that I switched careers. And I started at the Brooklyn paper, actually. That was my
Okay.
first job in
There you go.
journalism. I worked there while going part-time to Columbia Journalism School. Part-time's a 2-year program. When I was done with that, I got a job at the New York Observer covering commercial real estate, and that's when I met you.
Yes, that's one. Exactly.
And that was I knew nothing about real estate. Did I have any sort of intrinsic interest in it? But like any good reporter, I can find many things interesting, and real estate is certainly interesting.
So just before we go further into that, I apologize for cutting you off. So you did go. I know that I mentioned Cornell University. That was government and Spanish.
Yeah. I mean, I was your classic liberal arts major. I
Okay,
was totally
fair enough.
aimless,
Fair enough.
And government was sort of at Cornell there's a bunch of schools at Cornell, but at Arts and
Right.
Sciences, government is the sort of fallback major you do when you don't know what you want to do. And then, of course, many people then go to law school because they
Right.
still don't know what I took the LSAT thinking that would actually be my path, but convinced myself I'd done quite poorly on it. So therefore didn't apply. And I mean, I did fine, but I thereby avoided that. So yeah.
All right, good. So you're at the Observer.
The Observer covering commercial real estate, like leases and building sales. Fortunately, real estate has many great characters, as
Yes.
you're well aware,
Yep.
and wields an enormous amount of power in New York City. So it was actually sort of has proven super helpful moving forward, because after that I went and I covered, I freelanced for like a year, and then I went to a publication that was brand new called Capital New York, founded by a couple of Observer alums.
Okay.
And they were bought by Politico New York. And I covered the intersection of politics and transportation. And, you know, that's all interwoven with real estate, all that stuff. And then I moved to covering strictly politics at the Times.
Yeah, I know. I mentioned that we know each other since back in '06 and the Commercial Observer days. But I do recall you making some of those moves, and we sort of checked in on each other, periodically, which was always nice to hear.
The truth is, if you're going to cover New York City, there's very few better starting places than real estate.
No, I agree. And like you said, there's so many facets of it. Whether from housing and if you go out to the boroughs, you got industrial and then office and certainly retail, which I'm addicted to.
Right.
For lack.
Yeah. No, you are always such a good and super helpful source on retail, which is so different from the other facets of real estate.
Yes. We still remain a weird, other than the things that are public record, like, the various sales of properties and things like that, you would think that we were all hiding, some sort of treasure trove of something, that we release such limited information. And
it's true. Why is that?
I don't know. To this day, I really don't know. I talk about this regularly. I was a past member of Rebney's store committee. And we'd go to this room, and I don't mean to get too far off topic, but we'd go to this room once a month for the stores committee meeting. We'd sit there with 60, 70 of the best and most prominent retail leasing brokers, throughout the city, because you needed to be in the business for a certain amount of years to get into the membership, blah, blah, blah. And you'd sit there for an hour and a half, your classic rubber chicken lunch kind of thing, and every now and again there'd be a presentation. But we always went around the room talking about deals and transactions and things like that. But interestingly enough, everybody spoke, and you walked away feeling like you gained nothing.
Really?
Yeah, because everybody just, they spoke about the article that they had already put out, that said XYZ took the corner of 5,000 square feet and the asking rent was $500 a foot, or whatever it was. And so, this is a room of peers. But we're all, a lot of people, especially the older generation. I mean, by age, I'm defined by that. But my spirit is younger because I deal with such groups of people in the younger generation, social media and what have you, who are much more sharing about information. We don't give away priority stuff, but we talk about things. But the older generation, man, they still keep it close to the vest. If you don't know that broker well, you will get nothing. And quite frankly, I stepped away from Rebney because I just felt like for the amount of money it cost, there was no takeaway for me. And three or four of the members of that committee who I was dear friends with, we'd go have lunch, once or twice a month. And in that hour and a half, I'd pick up more information about the marketplace than anywhere else.
Well, because everyone in that meeting is competing with everyone else in that meeting.
Yeah.
So I'm sure individuals will share information about other individuals that they are perhaps competing with in the privacy of a one-on-one.
And that's fair. But if you want, and more people are taking to it today, again, younger generation of an abundance mentality. You don't have to give away top secret stuff. But just, again, repeating the article that was printed 14 times in 14 publications, you've told us nothing. You got a chance to pat yourself on the back again. God bless.
Yeah.
Whatever. So anyway.
So do you think it's different with office leasing? Do you think people share more?
I think when I read about office leasing, because I'm not involved whatsoever transactionally, I feel like I'm taking away more information. I feel like there's a little bit more precise. And no, you don't always have to know that the deal was done at $47.26 a foot, but a little bit better than the ask, because there's so much that goes into the details, and so whatever. But that remains our industry. It's my own little personal gripe. It'll probably be till the end of time, But it's okay. So you spend time with the Observer.
I did. Yeah.
How many years were you there?
I don't remember. Maybe 4.
All right. So that you had to meet a lot of people. Just
3.
Right. But you had to be there. You had to meet a lot of people. Like you said, great springboard.
Awesome.
For things. Right?
Yeah. No, it was great for me. I recommend it to. There's obviously the journalism market right now is terrible. and I'm super lucky to have a job. But I do recommend that young reporters sort of be open to anything, including things they know nothing about, or have no pre-existing interest in, and B, like, maybe cover real estate for a little bit.
Well, you make an interesting statement that the journalism business is terrible.
It's horrible.
Is it because there are just so many outlets and people are just spewing? Like what makes it so horrible?
No, it's this like we're 2 decades into the demise of print journalism, and
Right.
print ad revenue, and internet ad revenue has not replaced it. And, people have pivoted to subscription models and whatever, but they're, like, look at the daily news and what it used to be versus what it is now. I mean, that's true. There are major cities across the country that have almost no journalism left. So
Yeah.
they have no insight into what people are, what their government is doing. And I think that breeds like distrust in media, and sort of the polarization that we see today. I mean, I think it's a real societal problem.
Yeah, no, I think it's you make a good point. I was going to say, I primarily read the New York Post in terms of newspapers and stuff. I'm online reading information from various.
Oh, you read the Post in print?
No, I was just going to say to you, it took me a while, but I finally took the Post to my iPad. So I do the print version on the iPad. But I used to be, and I guess it was part of how I was brought up, my generation, whatever. There was just something about touching that paper, and I know a few people that are still the same way. There's nothing better than just, I don't know, holding, it's like you're holding that newspaper with one hand and your cup of coffee in the other hand, and it just works for making their day go. But I do it on the iPad. And I was going to say to you, is the Daily News still in print?
It is. I mean, in much diminished form. They still have some great reporters there, like, sort of, despite the sort of questionable business decision making at the top.
Right.
But it's, I mean, if you were to compare the Daily News 20 years ago to today, it's like a tiny version.
No, I think the last time I even paid attention, they talked about how diminished the physical paper was going to be. That's why I wasn't sure it was still around. But you're doing your stuff at the Times these days. How's that going?
Good. I feel very fortunate, in so many different ways. But I'm happy here.
All right, that's great. That's great. So we got a few things going on here in the city. They transition from real estate to politics, and politics back to real estate, and all of those kind of things. I think we might as well just hit the mayoral situation, because that's the most prominent right now. And I'd like to get your thoughts on all the the three candidates for mayor. I'll work from the bottom up in terms of the latest polling, and just get your thoughts. Tell me your thoughts on Curtis Lewa. He's certainly been around this town for a long enough time, and in his own inimitable way. Give me your thoughts on Curtis.
I mean, I can tell you that, to your point, he's polling in third place. He's, I mean, the Republican candidate traditionally gets like 20 to 30% of the vote, no matter what. He's well liked by many members of the party, but he's not a MAGA guy. He's not a Trump guy, and so there's sort of an interesting tension there. And I don't know, if you ask Curtis about it, he'll say that the January 6th stuff really turned him away from sort of the Trump wing of the party. I think there's also sort of a long history between him and Trump that I'm not fully read in on.
On ABC, Curtis had a show there for a long time. He had to come off because he's running for mayor. He had to give up his show, but Sid has him on regularly to speak. And to your point, I don't know if it's a full-on anti-Trump thing, but there is really just no connection there, and no one wants. I don't know if it's skeletons in the closet or what have you, but no one seems to dig in on it. And there's constant conversation, whether it's with Sid on the air or if you just read any particular newspaper or any piece of social media, about getting Curtis to drop out of the race.
Right. Well, Right. So supporters of Cuomo very much want Curtis out of the race because they believe that he will only stand a real chance against Mamdani if it's a one-on-one thing. And the polling does seem to bear that out. But Curtis has been super adamant that he's not
I
going
know.
anywhere. And he uses the most sort of extreme he says the most, I will be taken out of this race only if like I get shot or if
Yeah,
I'm
right.
carried out in a coffin, which is pretty definitive, So it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere.
Yeah, and look, I love Curtis, and sometimes just beyond the beret, it's hard for a lot of people to grasp some of those theatrics because I think certainly of these three, there's nobody who loves this town more than him. I mean, for all the reasons that Curtis is Curtis, he really is a guts and grits guy, and he's in the grind with everybody every day. And I'm not trying to poll for him, and I'm a big fan. I've met him on several occasions, but it's like he feels the most for the people. But unfortunately, they come back to that beret, and then once the beret comes up, there's just enough lack of seriousness that gets tied to that, which I just think it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. But besides that, what's your thoughts that if hypothetically Curtis drops out, whether it's today or next Tuesday or what have you, I hear these things that Curtis's people, they won't shift to Cuomo, and then you may wind up with just a chunk of people who don't vote.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not clear how many of Curtis's people would shift to Cuomo. That's an open question, but I also think honestly, it's probably a moot point. I don't think Curtis is going anywhere. So,
Yeah.
That means that for Cuomo to stand any sort of chance, he really has to gain some real traction in the next couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. So next up on our bottom-up countdown,
Cuomo?
tell us about your thoughts on Mr. Cuomo.
I mean, look, he's a well-known quantity, right? Like
Right.
everyone, he's got, universal name recognition. He's got high negatives, right?
Yeah.
People remember a lot of these sort of, the stories from his administration, how he resigned amid scandal. The nursing home stuff seems to have really pervaded the public consciousness. So he's trying, right? And a lot of the big money folks are lining up behind him. But
Yeah.
I think also it's not clear that big money carries the day, right? I mean, you look at the primary and the super PAC backing, Cuomo spent like more than $20 million, like far outspending anyone else in the race. And,
Still came up
he
short.
lost by 12 points.
Right.
So it seems a little bit like for the business folks, it's like, feels like a last ditch kind of effort. But,
Yeah.
things are unpredictable. New York City is dynamic. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I'm a lifelong, New York City guy, and in my general conversations, what drives me crazy is that we're the most important city in the whole wide world. Whether I'm biased or not, I still think we're the most important city in the whole wide world, and we're sitting here trying to figure out who's least worst in terms of our choices, and I just think that's quite frankly, a shitty place to be.
People make the same complaint every cycle.
Do they? Everybody stinks every cycle.
I hear the same thing every
Do
time.
you?
I mean, I'm not saying it's true, but
Yeah.
it's there is always sort of like a general dissatisfaction with the options.
I personally have found myself, the last 8 or 10 years a little bit more focused on things. I'm not out there waving, too many banners, but I speak about it a little bit more. That's just a place that I feel like we're going to be. And then, so we get to the top of the list for the moment, Mr. Mamdani, if I pronounce that correctly. What are you thinking there?
He's the possibly prohibitive frontrunner. He's done a really sort of, he's been really successful at sort of organizing large numbers of young, enthusiastic people. And he's like 20 points ahead of Cuomo or more in most polls. So I think absent some sort of really, remarkable event or series of events, like he is, he'll be mayor.
Right. And just from your knowledge, from maybe some of the inner workings of your day to day in terms of the business, he's made a lot of statements. Free housing, free supermarkets, what have you. Can you tell us or tell me, me, what it looks like about how easily or not easily he gets this stuff through? Are they just campaigning statements to get people excited, which it certainly has. It certainly has, to his credit. What's the likelihood of some of this stuff getting through, like Albany?
Sure. Well, there's no free housing promises. There's a freeze the rent promise for rent stabilized units. Yeah. Which de Blasio did for I don't remember how many years.
Yeah.
Maybe 3.
Yep.
But I'd have to check that. So that one is certainly. Seems logistically feasible if he controls the votes on the rent control board. A lot of his platform depends on tax increases from Albany. Governor Hochul has been publicly resistant to that. So, unless she were to somehow be swayed, that stuff seems like a really heavy lift politically. She's also facing re-election herself next year.
Yep.
So, there's a lot of, and also the midterms are next year. So there's a lot of different sort of countervailing political winds at play. But he's also, he suggested an openness to a certain amount of incrementalism, like his idea of having sort of universal childcare. You could see a world in which like he begins by making 3K truly universal, and then like expanding it to 2K or something. You can see how he would sort of aim to get there in a way that is not all at once and not as reliant on so much money being authorized by Albany.
Right. No, I think it's going to be extremely interesting. I hear the argument that we survived 8 years of de Blasio, and if he gets in, we'll survive 4 years of Mondami. But all of that certainly remains to be seen. But on a bringing it to real estate, where I'm from and where I live, there's a lot of things here that are, for lack of a better term, scary. The rent stabilization laws changed in 2019 that put a lot of restrictions on landlords from a multifamily perspective. It changed a lot of values of property. So I don't know what happens when he steps in. Eric Adams, I guess we got to throw him a little credit. That guy, remember him? Our mayor, got some things passed, so we're seeing some new construction, but there's a lot of property sitting on the sidelines because of stabilization laws that were put in effect pre-Mondami, and I don't know if any of that gets changed with some of the things he wants to bring in, so that remains to be seen. And then down to street level, like I said, where I hang out in the retail business, this conversation about $30 minimum wage, that's confronting a lot of retailers. I'm sitting with retailers on a regular basis now, and we're about 4 weeks out at this point, give or take.
Weeks, yep.
Yeah, and we're going to get this, we'll get this conversation to air pre-election, just to tie it in. But for months now, I've talking to retailers who are just like, all right, the election's not that far away. Let's just wait and see. And so it's just an interesting time. And
sure, he is a little bit of an unknown, right? And part of that is because he's young. He doesn't have, he's 33. I think he's about to turn 34. I don't know what your resume was like at that age. Mine was certainly fairly scant. So there isn't much, with Cuomo, you could almost sort of predict what will happen based upon his decades of experience. And I think with Mamdani, it will be, we'll find out soon enough.
Right. Is it concern? Does that bother you? And again, not to get overly.
I can't speak. I have no. Yeah. I have no personal opinions on any of this. But
yeah.
But I do think the sort of business community reaction to him has been really interesting and has actually been shifting over time as he's made like a concerted outreach efforts to people in the business community. Right.
Right.
met with Rebney multiple times. He is. I've heard people say that he's shown more openness to the business community than De Blasio did
Right.
at a similar time in his tenure.
Okay, well, I hope so. I'm trying to track it as best as possible. As not just a concerned citizen. I mean, I guess sort of as a concerned citizen. I live here. This is my home. It's my business, and I want to see how it all plays. Let's shift away from the mayor for now. Get out of there. What's topical for you these days? Besides that, anything you're working on? Do you do like long range planning? Are you digging deep onto something? I'm not looking for scoop or anything, but is it something that's
No,
top
I
of
mean,
mind?
there's storylines I follow. I'm following the casino stuff a bit. Does that impact you at all?
Yeah, no, it does. It does probably more. More at this point if Cohn winds up winning,
Yeah.
because now that all of Manhattan has been eliminated, going into when Cohn puts his together, if he wins and he puts his together, there's a retail component. So I may get involved, right? I may have opportunity
Right.
to be transactional there. The racinos, as they call them, Aqueduct and Yonkers, probably not for me. I haven't seen. I've looked. I guess I got to look a little harder in terms of what Bally's overall plan is if they happen to win up in the Bronx. I know it was the former Trump golf course and all that stuff. I'm thinking to myself as I'm speaking with you about what I've seen, and I don't think I've seen much.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
that stuff's super interesting. I mean, it's obviously very political, and casino gambling is very controversial.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a really it's a good storyline. Other than that, and the mayor's race, and I think that's pretty
Yeah.
much filling up my plate
Well,
right
that's good.
now.
Look, they're big. They're big stories. Even in our little town, those are some very big stories. Just going back a half step to the casino part of it, I read an article about Vegas from a gambling perspective. The numbers being down tremendously.
Really?
Yes, and I can't imagine. I've certainly done no deep dive into this, but I can't imagine that the fact that everyone can gamble in their hand, to the extent they can gamble in their hand now, prevents some of that. And I just wonder, that's why I think, when a Cohen or whoever does this, they have to have alternate means, because I don't think all of
Right.
you.
Yeah, no, there's definitely like an oversaturation and cannibalization issue that people have raised.
Yeah.
And how do the New York casinos, how are they going to interact with Atlantic City? It's one big market.
Yeah, it's funny that you say how they'll interact with Atlantic City, because I got to tell you, and I don't know that I've read every word, but I've read a lot of the articles on all of this casino stuff. I rarely hear about Atlantic City. I think they talked about when
Yeah.
Coney Island was involved. When Coney of all the places, when Coney Island was involved, they said, oh well, they'll build it up on Coney Island, but then you'll take a step off of the casino area, and then the neighborhood will be terrible. And what's it going to do? Because if you recall, when Atlantic City was built and the stories behind Atlantic City, it was great. But if you left the hotel grounds,
Oh, yeah.
it was suspect. And I think it was a lot of the conversation, with Thor and the group, in
I
Coney.
think the polls are very consistent that people do not want casinos in their residential neighborhoods.
Yes. No. Yeah.
And I think it's because of, predecessor situations like Atlantic City.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree, and the Hell's Kitchen and the surrounding area,
Yeah.
behind Times Square, put up a big, they put up a big fight and they won. I don't know,
Right.
that you get to point to one particular reason or not, but they won because it's not coming.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. And it's interesting how the conventional wisdom at the beginning of this, which was, I mean, I covered this at Politico. I can't count how many years I've been paying attention to this, but the conventional wisdom was always that the Manhattan electeds would never allow a casino in Manhattan. And, that conventional wisdom
Yep.
proved true,
Yeah.
despite the millions upon millions of dollars that Cohen and Silverstein and related put
Oh
into
my
their
God,
bids.
the amount of
So
money!
much money.
It's like it's obscene. It's obscene. You could solve the debt in in countries around the world,
You could do a lot of stuff with that money.
right? And that's just to be in the conversation, right? It really is amazing. But from a timing perspective, I recall just a little history. Like my brother and stepbrother had an auto parts business out in Queens, and Willets Point, which is where Cohen's going to put his development together for many, many years, was made up of like the place that you never went to, but that's where you had to go if you needed a fender fixed and all of those places. And I'm telling you, this is 15, 20 years ago that they were thinking about trying to buy the properties, but you can never buy the property because there's always some big project. At that moment in time, it wasn't casino. There was no such thing as casino talk.
It was a mall.
But it was monster development talk, exactly, whether it was resi and mall and all this stuff. But it's amazing how long this stuff goes before it becomes
It's amazing.
to fruition.
You can cover New York City for 20 years and just cover the same,
No, you're
story.
right. You're
Look at Atlantic Yards. Atlantic
Yes.
Yards is not done yet.
I know, which is insane. And then I'm at my office is at 49th and Madison, and I get to look out my window, literally look out the window, and watch how Chase Tower went up. JPMorgan Chase. I watched the whole thing.
It's a very cool. I like the base of that building.
Yeah, they've done a very interesting thing, and someone
Yeah.
was asking me why are the trees planted, but all the scaffolding is still. I said I don't know. I'm not the contractor. I don't know why, but I know that it's an all electric building, and it's
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, all electric. I think it's 2 million plus square feet, and they light up the side of the for an all electric building. They're certainly using the electricity because. I come at night. You see it. It's not Times Square lit, but they're flashing lights on the building. I can't imagine why. I cannot imagine why. But they're doing that. So.
And then you go a little farther east, and you have the Soloviev site, formerly the Solo site.
That's right.
Next to the UN, which has been empty for how long?
And right. God bless.
Decades.
Right. God bless these guys that can hold. And just,
And just
pay
sit
the
on it.
taxes
Yeah.
and all that, like you talk about money, right? But timing's a funny thing because now we all read the papers, right? Class A office space, there's a shortage of it. And so they'll figure out what the next opportunity is and they'll tie in somehow. These are still, Soliev's piece that's a huge plot of land as far as New York City is concerned. And so they'll adapt and they'll figure it out. Just the same way related when they were eliminated, a short while ago, not like yesterday, but when they were eliminated, they said, okay, here's our plan B. And they were ready to go. Be interesting to see what, an SL Green does, with their tower now.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's a building that's been around for a long time.
Right.
And they'll probably have, again, no one's holding a charity for SL Green, but they'll probably have to sink a ton of dough into it and upgrade it.
Well, what's interesting is the casino bids very much grew from the pandemic, right? And these concerns about the fate of office buildings. So all of these real estate owners saw this as a way to monetize and sort of pivot away from traditional office uses.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
It's been interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I think you bring up an interesting point because it's the exact opposite, right? We'll talk about Willets Point from 20 some odd years ago. But if you look at, like you say, pandemic, what do we do instead? Okay, we'll go casino. And then all of a sudden, wait, holy shit, we don't have enough Class A office space. And that, if you think about it, as New York City real estate goes, that was like this, that shift, right? Because we all, whether we were on the air talking about it or just talking to our colleagues and peers, office is dead, right? COVID, work from home, no one's ever coming back. To now, shortage of Class A whole host of the buildings are now going residential. So that takes a certain amount of supply off. And there's somewhat of a shortage of office. But in the grand scheme of New York City real estate and approvals and zoning and all that stuff, it was pretty quick. So, it's going to be, it's going to be interesting, I think, as all things go in this town, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be fun. I love hanging out with you. We got to do it more often. You and I got to get together for a cup of coffee, and we'll do an off-air political fight because no, Dana, keep doing what you're doing. I always follow you. Keep writing your stuff. Let's stay in touch like we always do. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for spending the time. Have a great day.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.